So we're going to continue a little bit on some of the earlier conversations on the MAGA, right? MAGA, as we learned. So we're going to focus a lot on that first M, right? Which was the map out the issue. So when we talk about KPIs, key performance indicators, we talk about mapping out that issue, right? That's what that's all about. How do we know if we have a constraint or something in our process if we're not mapping these things out? And how do we know that we have the people on the right seat on the bus if we don't have a benchmark or a goal that we're holding them to, right? Eric said, if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. So we're going to talk a lot about that measuring component. So before we get into introductions, guys, jump on your app. If you haven't already seen our poll inside the session, just maybe while we go through these introductions, jump into that poll and answer for you, and I think you can do multiple answers. I'm not sure if it lets you do one or multiple, but answer what is the most important KPI to you. What do you think the most important KPI is at your dealership, your operation? So be thinking about that, because we're going to come back to it. But let's get to introductions real quick. So, Crystal, introduce yourself to everybody. Where are you located? What we want to know is locations, maybe rough sales area, and we want to know employees. How many employees? Because what we want to get at is what is the scope of your operation, right? Because that's going to have a lot to do with these KPIs, what we're tracking, and how we're communicating that. So introduce yourself.
Okay. I'm Crystal Fish. I'm the CEO of Benchmark Auto Sales. We have two locations, one in Asheville, North Carolina, one in Raleigh, North Carolina. Asheville was the first flagship location. We have about 1,700 active accounts, 21 million in receivables, 37 employees. We have a full service center. What else am I leaving off?
That's good. Yeah, that's great. Accounts gives us, we can back into some of the numbers from that, but we know the scale and the scope of the tracking and the communication that you're going to have to do.
Yes.
So thank you. Everything's like okay back home?
Everything is good. All of our employees are safe. Our properties were not damaged, which is a blessing. Mm-hmm. And we're just trying to figure out how to operate our business and support our customers.
Waiting to get that
times.
CPI number of how many
yeah.
full losses you had, huh? Okay, Joe, introduce yourself.
So, I'm Joe Powell. I live in Oklahoma City. I have 3 small little satellite dealerships in southwest Oklahoma. So I leave home on Monday morning. I go work southwest Oklahoma, and then I come back home on Friday. And we started leasing in May of 2008. So we've been at this a little while. We've written quite a few leases. We only run about 500 accounts. So that's kind of our sweet spot where we're able to cash flow everything and just make it work for us. We have about 15 employees. Each little satellite is pretty much a cashier, collector, and a salesperson. So each store just has 2 people there. And then we have anywhere from 8 to 9 or 10 people in service departments. So we carry about 8 lifts and try to keep our cars on the road.
Okay, cool. John.
All right, John Kirkland, Cowboy. We've been leasing since 2008-09. During the last recession, we've got 4 locations in the Utah market from Salt Lake, Tooele, Ogden, and Logan. We've got 4,300 accounts right now. I've got 90 employees that are stateside and 30 employees that are in Mexico.
Ooh, that sounds interesting. Okay. Okay. And you guys don't care who I am, so it doesn't matter. Okay, so have we all voted on what our most important KPI is? Yes. What is it? Let's hear it. Most important KPI. $1 day, $1 delinquency.
Collateral recovery ratio.
CRR. Anybody else? Cash collected?
Total cash collected.
Total cash collected as a percentage of expected?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so we got 13 answers. Sounds like we got the majority of you. 4 for 1 day, $1. 5 for 1 day, $1. 4 for debt leverage ratio. Why didn't someone say that? How important is that?
Very.
Pretty important, right? Tim, pretty important? How much money can I spend? Okay, cool. So we want to go through this. So here's the scenario, everybody. Put yourself in this made-up situation. You're on an island. You can get a text message once a day, once a week. It has no more than 3 basic KPIs in it, right? 3. You can get 3. So we talked about our number 1. Let's talk about our top 3. What 3 would those be? Write those down on your paper. What would the very top 3 most important KPIs, if you were on a stranded island, you had no idea how your operation was doing, you didn't know what was going on in your dealership, what are the 3 that you absolutely need to know daily or weekly to know the health of your business, right? To know if you're doing well, if things are okay, if you need to build yourself a raft and, get yourself off there and get home and fix things. And let's go down the list here. I'm going to ask each of our panel members, what are their top 3?
So I left off that I've only been in this industry for 15 months. And one of the things that I found most intriguing when I got here was there were so many KPIs. Based on who you spoke to, what their goals were for the year, for the month, it changed a lot. Right now, I would say for us, we're really focused on cash, right? So cash collected versus projected, delinquency, or account retention. Some would make, those are 2 KPIs, but one category, I guess. And then we're really tracking our recondition into frontline to get our inventory back up, to keep our accounts in check.
Okay.
So those are kind of the 3 that are in the top of our scorecard.
Okay, scorecard. It's good. We're going to talk about that.
Okay.
Okay, so you're saying your cash collected, your delinquency, 1 day, $1, and then you said one we hadn't heard before was kind of time to line.
Yes.
Right? From the time I bought it to the time I get it out front, like the time frame it takes you to recon, or the number of units you're getting through recon? Or
The time frame, but yeah, we have a target. We have a daily target to get to the front line.
As far as the quantity?
Number of units.
Okay,
yes.
Number of units to the front line. Okay. So number of units through recon. Okay. That's a really good one. Joe, what do you got?
So we look at collection efficiency as well, and we feel like that delinquency and recency both feed into that. So collection efficiency. Another thing
So
that
let me stop you there. When you say collections efficiency, you're saying delinquency and recency. Is that a percentage or a trackable number that you're taking those 2 and collecting and making a collector efficiency? Or are you using the cash collected versus expected?
collected versus expected.
Okay, so that's your collector's efficiency.
Right.
Okay, cash to cash.
Yep. The next thing we're looking at is 2 things. One is time to break even on the car. So how much time is it going to take us to break out of our car?
Okay, months to
break even.
Okay.
And then we try to dig a little bit deeper into that. We all have cars coming back, whether it's a lease return, they want to upgrade, something's wrong with the car. So I'm trying to get our staff to understand that if we bring a car back before we get to break even, how did we really do? So we call it a break-even factor. So for example, if we have 10 months to break even, we get the car back in 5 months, now we have a 50% break-even factor. Or if we keep the car out for 15 months, then we have a 150% break-even factor. So I'm trying to get the staff to understand what it takes for the dealership to move ahead. You know what I mean? I'm trying to show my staff over and over again all these numbers so they understand what I'm preaching and where I'm trying to go with it.
Yeah, so you guys both mentioned good things. You mentioned a scorecard. You mentioned you're showing the staff over and over. We're going to get to those things because that side of it is really, really important.
If they don't know where we're going, how are we going to get there?
It's hugely important. When we're going to, John, what do you got?
We grade every one of our customers, so I look at the percentage of the A, B, C, and D, and F deals that we're doing, and making sure that we're doing the right deals and putting the right stuff on the books. And then on Monday versus a Friday delinquency, how we're improving that route. And all of our collectors have certain goals and measurables for their Monday versus their Friday. And then also the service, we've had an inventory issue just because we haven't been selling as many cars. So we worry about our 90-day average right now, like how many cars are over 90 days in our inventory, just because that just costs money.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So then we're talking about, make-ready age. Okay. Mm-hmm. Collections. What that had me, my brain kind of went somewhere else because I started thinking back to Tim's, and my notes that I took on Tim's was, he had that little chart at the bottom where it talked about, you buy, you recon, you sell, and if something along that line is broken, right, then the other ones bog down or get backed up, right? So it's kind of like when you try to push a lot of water through a tiny little hose, that's not going to work, right? So if one of the sections is constrained, like sales,
Yep.
then you've got to signal up the path to slow down on that buying thing, right? Because then those days in inventory start getting out of whack. Anyone have anything else that we didn't mention? Any others that you feel are really, really important that we should be tracking? I think I'm getting in trouble for moving too much.
Average age and mileage of the portfolio?
Thank you. Okay, average age and mileage.
If the portfolio is getting younger and less mileage, or getting older and.
Okay, would you put that on your top 3? On your desert island, is that one you want?
Yeah, probably.
Okay, that's really cool. Anybody else have a top 3 that we missed? Luke? Number sold. We didn't talk about that, did we?
Joe?
Just your plus or minus on active accounts and your average receivable per to know if your portfolio is contracting or expanding.
Okay. Number of accounts.
Well, that and the average receivable per account.
Okay.
Those go hand in hand, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And of course, some of these numbers you can back into with the other numbers, right? So if hey, my accounts went up, I sold this many cars, and I know this is my, financed amount per car, then I kind of know what I put on the books, things like that. So what we get at is when we have people on the bus, and if they don't know that they're the guy in charge of the snacks, and that snacks have to be distributed at this rate, how can we get mad at them for not giving me a snack when I need a snack, right? Like, we have so many people that we just throw them in a seat, and they're like, oh, well, what am I supposed to do here? Am I the guy with the music? Am I the guy with the snacks? Am I the guy that's supposed to hand over the puke bag? Like, what do I do here, right? We don't know because we're not explaining those benchmarks, those goals, and then we're also not holding them accountable, right? So this comes down to that accountability. So now let's talk about the frequency of some of these, right? Because it's really important. If you're like, well, I track sales quarterly. Okay, that's not going to be helpful, right? Because by that time, you've already bought too many cars, they're already backed up. Or I track my recon, time to line. Oh, well, I only do that, once when we get together with 20 group, to see what's actually going on. So, panel, talk to us about your frequency. Like, what numbers are you tracking? And these can be alternative numbers, too. Let's talk about some of the other areas, because we know we could track 1 million, right? And if you talk to my buddy Luke, he tracks 1 million stupid numbers in all sorts of spreadsheets because he loves spreadsheets. But it gets overloaded, right? So we have the handful that we can really digest and keep in our brain, and then we have a bunch of other ones that are probably pretty handy, but maybe we're only doing those monthly or quarterly. But talk to us about frequency.
So we have a nightly report that probably has 50 numbers on it that goes out every night. And that gives us everything from our borrowing base to accounts sold, leased, wholesale, everything, right? Delinquency, even our cash that we have and upcoming receivables that we need to pay. Then we have a weekly scorecard through our L10 meetings. So that's just my management team that we have 8 numbers on the scorecard that gets updated every week. We're in the process of deploying scorecards down to each department. So then we'll have departmental scorecards, so then it's more relevant to the team members. And then we have our monthly meetings with the KPIs that we track for the whole month, and then quarterly.
Okay. So any numbers in there that you feel like are maybe unique or that we haven't mentioned that you feel like stand out and really make a difference to those departments?
I think it's hard to be unique. I'm trying to think. Kind of put me on the spot about something
Okay,
unique.
think about that,
Yeah,
Joe.
let me think about it for a minute.
Talk to us about what unique numbers do you track outside of kind of our basics, right? We've got what we talked about today. We've got our composite from our 20 groups. Anything else that you're tracking or would like to be tracking?
One thing that I try to show the staff continuously that even helps me is I give them their travel rate 2 or 3 times a week. You know, what are we projected to travel towards the end of the month as far as sales goes, as far as dollars down go, and also days supply of inventory. So we set 3 little dealerships in a triangle 45 minutes apart from each other. So if one location's slow, then I can pick up and move cars to a different location. So those are things that I'm updating them with weekly or every few days. And then also they're doing their KPIs every Friday because we're all pretty much realize that Monday morning collections are our worst and Friday evenings are the most consistent. You know what I mean? So that's pretty much what we do on a weekly basis.
Mm-hmm. Any numbers that you would like to be tracking that you're not?
No, I think we track quite a few numbers
You think
as
you've
well.
got everything that's under the sun? Okay. John, what I want to know from you is with the scale of the operation, the number of locations, number of employees, out of the country, all that stuff, how are you keeping track of these things? Like, and how do you communicate that, right? Because everyone's not getting together in one meeting and huddling around your laptop, right?
No.
How do you
we
track
have
that?
daily emails from all the department heads and team leaders or what have you for us to give us their numbers. Every night I get a nightly email from each department for us. We use the EOS operating system. Every department, every level has an L10 meeting with their scorecards, so the technicians put in how many hours they billed that week. And that is done weekly, and I can jump into any meeting I want via Teams. It's that Teams software and Zoom software in COVID. I mean, that made it a lot easier for everybody because it wasn't whether you're going to do it, it's now you get to do it.
Yeah.
So we just do that. Like I was literally on 2 meetings this morning during the opening ceremony.
Who's responsible for those numbers?
They are.
They are.
They are, absolutely. Everybody has their number they need to put in their scorecard.
Okay. So, are there any numbers you put in?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we've lost a couple of our sales director and our BDM over the last few months, so I've taken over their numbers.
Okay.
So we have how many people were on our website, what was the active time for us, engagement and all that stuff, and what was the lead conversion, and then the appointment conversion on that versus the show ratio.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that we do as well, we've employed Crystal and I have not known it, but we have used the same company. We all pull lots of different reports, and then we try to compile them. I have a source, and she does as well. I have them go out every Friday night and pull all the reports, and then they upload them to a dashboard. So Monday or Saturday morning when I go into my office, I have all my numbers are there for the week, and then they pull at the end of the month. So I get my automated Friday report numbers that happen. It's not based on somebody's input, whether those numbers are right or wrong. It's downloaded from our DMS, and then I get a sales dashboard, a collection dashboard, and a charge-off dashboard. So therefore, I can see my early returns versus break-even, so that I can see those numbers. I can see my collection efficiency numbers, and I'm pretty much knowing what sales numbers are, since that's kind of where I lean to. But that happens without human interaction and allows for fewer errors that way.
Interesting. Who would not trust your employees to enter their own numbers into a spreadsheet? I see one hand. Okay. John, how do you get away with that?
Trust but verify.
You live in Utah? Everyone's
No,
trustworthy?
everybody's honest. I mean, we're all Mormon over there, so no. No, it's a trust but verify. So the department head will verify their numbers. He actually knows their numbers, so when they're going through their scorecard, if they're wrong, they will correct them. He'll call them out.
Also, I think it's important that, so I do use an external company to build dashboards, but it's also important for the employees to own their numbers, right? And key those into the scorecard. We've seen significant improvements with some of our leadership and even some of our middle managers of having to send a daily text or put something in a scorecard. It forces ownership, right? And I've not found where they weren't keying them in correctly. And to be perfectly honest, if they aren't, they're not the right employee. So I would solve that problem before I would change my process of having accountability for the scorecard.
Okay,
And it's
trust
usually
but
a training-
verify.
It's a training issue.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10, if they're
Right.
inputting it wrong, it's a training issue.
Right.
It probably is, because they're pulling some sort of report that they don't fully understand, or they're maybe putting the criteria wrong, and they've been entering or thought that's the way they were supposed to be doing it this whole time. So I think there's a lot to be understood or appreciated about the ownership of the number, right? Even when we set goals and we set these benchmarks for salesmen or collectors or mechanics or efficiency, are we doing that with the employee, or their managers doing it with them and setting that expectation of where they need to be, and now they're bought into that goal, right? And then they're reporting back and having some accountability.
So we use Google Sheets where everybody goes and from wherever they're at. So then that way they just automatically input their numbers instead of emailing it to me. And then I have to go add them in. They put them all in their numbers. I go in on Saturday mornings and then everything's there. And then I do verify as well. So.
Yeah. Any other tools you guys are using for that purpose? Tracking, distributing?
Bloom Growth is the app that we use for the EOS software. And it has an organizational chart. You can put in as many meetings as you want. They do charge per member. So my sales team is 1 member. My collection team is 1 member. So everybody doesn't
Need their own login?
They don't need their own login.
And
The
we
lot
use
tech
90.
doesn't need a login.
We use 90.io.
Okay, that's another EOS
Yes.
branch
And
off.
then we use Power BI, which is super beneficial. We're doing that through auto analytics.
What is that?
It's what you create a data lake with all of your data out of your DMS, and then there's scripts written to upload it into Power BI. So it gives you pretty dashboards.
Sorry, give that to me in Yankee English. You said what?
So you basically can export.
What was the name of the company?
Power BI.
Power
AI?
BI.
BI.
It's a Microsoft.
It's
me?
Microsoft.
Okay.
It's a Microsoft.
Sorry about the accent.
Says the Asheville.
Speak slow.
You
I know.
think I
Slow,
would
you
figure
don't
this
tell.
out?
I was waiting for that.
No
it
habla
took you a
español.
little while.
Okay, so did you guys catch the name of that? So if you're interested, of course, get some more information on that. Talk to us about other barriers you guys have to getting accurate KPIs.
I think one of the biggest barriers is still within the DMS systems. I think I saw coming into this space, it's a really data-rich industry, but data poor in the ability to use it to make decisions quickly. I think that's putting all that together, right? Not
100%
just
agree with you.
saying. So I do think that there's a lot of things going on, trying to help with the transparency with the DMS companies and improve the abilities to report and use the data. But that is a huge obstacle. It slows things down. It makes it a little harder than it should be. But I have seen a lot of willingness to help and change, which I think is great. Again, I'm new, so I don't know if that's new or if it's just me kind of getting in and getting my feet planted in these spaces.
Joe?
I'm a believer that sometimes we get paralysis by analysis. And I think we try to look at numbers every 30 minutes, where we at, you know what I mean? I've been in this, like I said, since 2008. I know Monday morning's where we're at. I know where we're hoping to go by Friday evening. I don't want them having to input so many numbers when it takes away from their job. You know what I mean? We have weekly goals. That's where we're supposed to be. They know that. They're accountable for their numbers. And I think it works for us. You know what I mean? To each their own. So we don't try to overanalyze, but we analyze weekly. We analyze every couple of days on sales targets and if we're on pace for the end of the month. And at the end of the month, we get there.
Yeah. Yeah. John, do you have any input on that, on maybe obstacles or areas of improvement that you feel like?
Just getting all the meetings to run the same way was very difficult. Yeah, I mean, over the period of time, and that seemed to be the hardest part of switching over to that EOS software, is just having every manager follow the same routine. But having the meetings now start on time, end on time, the employees are loving that. And there's actually relevant stuff getting talked about. All the employees have given me good feedback about that.
Yeah. Does anyone get into their employee reported numbers and change a number on purpose just to see if they'll come back and catch it? Like just sabotage the report a little bit? No? Okay. That's it.
Just you. Just you.
You have a lot of time, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we talked about, what is that, like
We're trying to make them right and you're making them wrong.
70% of people quit because of their boss? Yeah.
Jeff.
Very, very high turnover at my place. Okay, we've got a couple of minutes left, but it had me thinking of one other area of data, because I agree with you on the DMS side, and no offense to the DMS that's here. It's not, the new car guys, they got all these fancy tools and widgets and everything that take that DMS and put it into beautiful little spreadsheets and charts and all sorts of graphs and nonsense. They give them these beautiful dashboards, right? And we're over here, spreadsheet jockeys trying to create these little, Excel spreadsheets that shared Google Drives that everyone's got to punch stuff into to see where we're going. Having more robust reporting and that sometimes can eliminate that altogether, right? I mean, if these reports were automatically generated and sent out, maybe we spend a little more time talking about the numbers than generating the numbers, right? And that's been my argument sometimes with the 20 group program is it's like, man, I spent all my time trying to put my numbers into my composite instead of actually looking at my composite.
Right.
So I actually took the composite after our last 20 group and I put it into ChatGPT, just uploaded the whole darn thing, and I don't know if that's illegal or not, so hopefully they're not here. But, and then I would just ask it questions, like, hey, can you tell me how well, Jeff's doing compared to the other line items? And that was kind of interesting feedback, to start using AI as a tool to start kind of what's the word, query your information a little bit differently to kind of maybe generate some automatic reports, generate more visuals, get a little bit of feedback. What did you identify? What I knew. Well, pretty much what I knew. Yeah, it's like, hey, my delinquency's bad. Yes, my charge-offs are bad, and my days in inventory have gone up. Yeah, thank you. So as I get smarter to query it, to the point earlier that Tim was talking about, it's garbage in, garbage out. So if I ask it a stupid question like, tell me Jeff Watson's strengths and weaknesses, then it's going to go through that 20 group and tell me what I know because I can look at it as well. Now, if I become more sophisticated with my prompts, then of course it becomes more sophisticated back to me. So in its defense, I'm not very sophisticated. With the last couple minutes, guys, do we have questions, or has any of this sparked any input from the audience? Because obviously, you know us, we feel like collectively we're smarter than we are individually. So we would love to hear if this has prompted anything from the audience. Questions and or comments. Right here.
The EOS system you guys.
Whoa, here we go. Which one do you guys?
It's the entrepreneur operating system. It's called Traction. So there's a book, and you can implement it yourself. I strongly discourage you in doing that, and hire an integrator, an implementer. It's a really good program. It gives a lot of structure around planning, short-term and long-term. It has a people analysis part, so you spend a lot of time in the first quarter analyzing your people, setting up your core values, your culture statement. But it is really about planning and structure, focusing on the right things at the right time. You set rocks for each quarter, so then everyone is focused on the same things versus chasing, right? In this business especially, there's always a fire, something you can go chase. But if you have your rocks to kind of stabilize you and refocus you back each quarter. So we've found it very beneficial. We're only in, Cowboy's farther along than we are. We're just finishing up 3 quarters and going into the 4th quarter now in our first year planning.
We've been using it since 2018. Actually, at the LHPH conference in 2018 is when we rolled it out for our team, and it has made a huge difference in the business. For everybody is going in the right direction, and my rocks will trickle down to the sales manager's rocks. Our service director's rocks will trickle down to his, so that everybody's helping everybody accomplish what we want to do in the next 90 days.
Yeah.
And literally after this one, I'm flying to Vegas to go have our quarterly meeting.
I never get invited to Vegas to their house and boating and everything they do, but whatever. And rocks are a good thing. So there's a lot of little phrases and words you'll hear the EOS guys use. Buy the book Traction by Gino Wickman. You'll read it, and then you'll have to read it again, and then you'll have to read it again, you'll have to read it again.
And buy the
again,
other
and
5
again, and
books.
again.
Yes.
And then buy the other
And
5
then-
books that go in that, because the one you want to give to your people is about what EOS is all about, so that your people know where you're going.
Just called Get It, or
I think it's what is EOS?
Oh, okay.
Or what the heck is EOS?
What the heck is
Yeah, they
EOS?
use the heck word in there.
it's a whole system. It takes all business philosophy books and basically puts it in a system. You know, who's on the right seat on the bus, your traction vision, it's everything all together. So good luck with that. It's wild. Any other questions out there? I saw some hands. Brett.
So quick question, and something that I see a lot is, like you talked about, it's garbage in, garbage out. Everybody has a different spreadsheet from how they track. And so you create these KPIs, you have all these things that you want to track. Have you ever misinterpreted your own data and made a decision that ended up like a knee-jerk reaction to, oh, this must be my problem, right? And if you have, what kind of things do you do now to like prevent that, right? So a 20 group is a great place to ask questions, so you're not, just kind of confirming your own hypothesis. And in your guys' organization, if you see that numbers are out of whack, what's the process that triggers to try and correct it or make the decision? And again, the second part was, have you ever made the wrong inference of your data before?
Yes. Yes, we've interpreted it wrong all the time. And what we do is, if there's a issue, we'll throw it up into the leadership meeting to where the controller, the service director, myself, and the owner are there. And we will talk about it and make sure that we're all, before we make a decision now, instead of the knee jerk, oh, let's just stop buying cars.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? During the COVID, when COVID first
Yeah.
rolled out, how many of you stopped buying cars because we're not going to sell them anymore?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh,
If you'd looked at the numbers, you would have known by Friday we're still selling.
we're still selling cars and you need to buy more now.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Instead of just waiting. Yeah.
I think we do the same thing. I see the numbers, I chew on the data quite a bit. I think of the data before I go to my key personnel, and then we discuss the numbers, and I try to get their input to try to make them feel like they're trying to help come up with the answer instead of me trying to force things on them. I'm trying to get them asking the questions to get their idea of where we go from here, and it seems to help a little bit, a lot.
Yeah, I think the biggest benefit for us is really trying to put everyone in the same room and look at the numbers, but I think also patience, taking things slow, thinking about unintended consequences. Also, I don't like to do anything that I don't have an exit strategy for. So before we make a decision, I like to make sure that we know if we make it, how are we getting out of it, how do we back up or adjust. So that's been super important. But having the leadership team all aligned and looking at it, I think really makes the most sense and keeps us from making, we will always make mistakes, but it keeps you from making as many of them or some that you can't come back quickly from.
Mm-hmm. And I think it helps prove hypothesis, right? Like, well, if I have more cars in inventory, I'll sell more. Well, let's go back. We've got historical data now. Let's prove that out, right? Well, no, actually, if I have more leads, I'll sell more. Not necessarily the leads either. Like, let's prove it. Let's see what's going on here. One thing I like to do with ours is we have a Google sheet that's shared with my managers, and I'll go in there and just make notes on certain cells, like, hey, this week we changed this major policy, So 2 months ago, I made a little note that said closed on Saturdays because we decided to be closed on Saturdays. And so now I get a look as that pans out over the next couple weeks over leads, sales, collections numbers, and I can say, looking back on it, right where I left that little note of the week we were closed on Saturdays is when everything started to go this way, right? So to your point, Brett, it's helped me actually reverse some knee-jerk reactions. Any other questions? Comments, concerns? Don't worry, nope.
Oh, can you hear me? Okay, here we go. So sometimes when you look at these key performance indicators and you manage to those indicators, you end up having the opposite effect, which we've done a lot. So I'll say, okay, I'm going to really manage to hit this number, thinking that number really matters. And what happens is your employees focus on that number and maybe fudge in other places to hit that number, and then you lose other processes. How do y'all go about fixing that when you see it come up?
I think the scorecard has been super beneficial for us because you have the numbers, you know which ones influence the other number, right? So if I'm looking at my average recon and my gross markup, or maybe that wasn't a good example, I'm thinking about my scorecard, but you're just watching all the numbers, and I think for me, that was probably I didn't realize you could ever sell yourself out of business until I joined this industry, and I came in guns a-blazing, let's sell, lease, sell vehicles, and then all of a sudden, we had that little graph that Tim had up. We had inventory that needed to be reconned and not a lot of units on the front line. So that was a great example of where I was focused on leasing, how many number of accounts are we adding every single month? And we were having record-breaking months to then go into, I had no cars. So I think that was a quick, hard lesson for me to learn. I'm sure there'll be a lot more in days to come, but I think the scorecard and understanding how each number impacts the other number is critical, and it has to be understood by everyone on the team so that they can make adjustments accordingly.
I totally agree. If you implement something, and say you put a delinquency bonus out there, 1 to 15, 15 to 30, 30 plus, and say it's not necessarily hitting what your total target is. Maybe you have to implement a recency type bonus, something to complement the two so that they see the bigger picture. And because we all know that if we have a delinquency bonus, our collectors can collect us out of business. You know what I mean? So if you're not getting the objective you want, add something into it to complement it, and always be willing to tweak your numbers and changes as you go along down your road to success.
100%. I mean, I love thinking of our service shop is we want to get cars out, but we wanted to lower the average cost of reconditioning per car. But then we also had to measure how many comebacks were coming off of the front line back into the service shop that we weren't reconditioning them enough or up to our standards for it. And that just so hard once you make those little changes, because now all the technicians are like, oh, we don't really need to do windshield wipers. We live in Utah, we're gonna get snow. Wipers are fairly important. So it's just, little tiny things like that. You're like, no, let's make sure they're safe.
Yeah. It's that whack-a-mole phrase, right? Like you're whacking it over here and it's going to pop up over there. So us as operators need to be smart enough to know, like, man, we've got amazing recon numbers, man. We're not reconning anything. And then you over here, well, my goodwill and policy has just gone through the roof, right? What could that be? What could that be? Yeah. So, Tim, it's time for lunch. Time for lunch. I'm not ever going to be the guy that keeps you from lunch. I'm dead on that. So we will wrap this up. Thank the panel, guys. Appreciate you being here and sharing those with us.